Big night of basketball ahead for the Kentucky Wildcats, who are taking on arguably the best team in the country. What do we need to know about the Kansas Jayhawks before they take on Big Blue Nation?
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what is going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be previewing Kentucky basketball's matchup with the Kansas Jayhawks, going to be a massive showdown. Also, the Wildcats have picked up a commitment from a five-star center in Jaden Quaintance. I'm going to talk about that as well on today's episode. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky basketball on the road in Chicago, taking on what I think right now is the best team in all of college basketball. The way we're going to do this today, we're going to talk about the Jayhawks. What do we know about KU and some of their individual stars? We're going to talk about the matchups. How do the Wildcats, as shorthanded as they are, take on Kansas in this one? And then we're going to talk about Jaden Quaintance later on in the show. So let's start here with the Jayhawks. What do we know about Kansas? Well, the first thing I want to point out is let's go over to KenPom. That's how we did things last year. It's how we did things the year before. I'm not going to lean as heavy into the numbers here on the show. I'm just going to kind of tell you what's good, what's not, and what we need to expect. The first thing that you need to know is through two games against really bad opponents, Kansas has dominated. They've looked really good on both ends of the floor, scoring 99 points in both of those contests, holding both of those teams under 65 points in Manhattan and North Carolina Central. Random side note, North Carolina Central has a player on their team, I believe, named Po' Boy King, just a phenomenal name, nothing else to note there. But as far as efficiency goes, when you look at KenPom, which does dive into adjusted efficiency on both offense and defense, their tempo, possession length, things like that, Kansas does move fast on the offensive end of the floor. Their adjusted tempo is top 60 nationally. They're very efficient there as well. They have shot the three ball and inside the arc very, 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 very well so far through these two games. And their defense has been really solid as well. They haven't created a ton of steals, which I think is going to be very important when we talk about matchups here in just a little bit. But that's what you need to understand about Kansas. They have statistically been dominant, and when you go and actually watch their games, they've been very dominant, aggressive, pushing towards the rim. On, I believe, a preview episode a season ago, we dove into the Kansas Jayhawks offense with Bill Self, how he likes to run things, how they like to do things from an X's and O's standpoint. It's really fascinating how everything can kind of run through the post at times, especially if you have a dominant big man. And that's what Kansas has this season in Hunter Dickinson. Transfer from Michigan. You and I have talked about him a lot on the show earlier this season. He almost came to Kentucky, took a visit, and then decided to go for the Jayhawks over the Wildcats. He is someone that is a known commodity. In fact, Kentucky played against him last year when the Wildcats faced off against the Wolverines, I believe, in London. So Kentucky has seen Hunter Dickinson before. We know who he is. We've talked about his strengths and his weaknesses. But for those of you that were not listening at that time, let me go ahead and tell you. The kid can shoot the three at 7'1", but he is also very dominant around the rim. He can also distribute the basketball a little bit as well. So far this season, he is shooting 65% from the floor, 100% from three. He has yet to miss. I believe he's taken 4 3-point attempts. He's also shooting 83% from the foul line. 1.5 blocks, 1 steal, 3.5 assists, 8 rebounds, 19.5 points in just 22 minutes a game. I believe that is tied for third best on the team right now for Kansas, and he is averaging almost 20 points a game. He has been an insanely efficient player so far for the Jayhawks. He's looked really, really good and very dominant, and he's not the only taller taller player that Kansas has on this roster that they really like to use. Kevin McCullar at 6'7", 212 pounds. He's also been solid for Kansas so far this season as well. He's somebody else that we're going to talk about when we discuss matchups. 18.5 points He's currently shooting over 60% from the floor as well, 41.7% from three. I mean, we can talk here about the individual numbers, but for the fact that this team is currently shooting over 60% as a team and 46.5% from beyond the arc through 2 games, regardless of the opponent, is still very, very impressive. This is a team that likes to push things towards the rim, get aggressive, get the ball in Hunter Dickinson's hands, and then distribute off of that. They've got several players who are averaging more than just a couple of assists per game. They've averaged 29.5 through these first two games. I think it does need to be pointed out the fact that they've played 2 really bad opponents, but holy cow, Kansas, I mean, you have come out swinging against some of these teams. Very impressive with some of their individual pieces, most notably Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullar Jr., and then as a whole, they've just been very dominant. They've had some younger players step up as well. Johnny Furphy, who I believe is in Aussie, he's averaging 10.5 in 18 minutes. He's shooting well as well. El Marco Jackson, a freshman guard, 8.5 points. He's averaging 7.5 assists per contest. He's not the best three-point shooter so far, but he's still shooting above 50% from the floor as a whole. They've got really good players. Nicholas Timberlake, I believe, is a senior. And then Dejuan Harris Jr., who has also been here for quite some time. He's averaging 24 minutes a game. And a season ago, he was solid for them, averaged almost 9 a contest, 6.2 assists a year ago. He's not been off to the hottest shooting start, which you would like to imagine if his shooting numbers were at least average, because he shot 40% from 3 last year. What would this team's statistics look like if his numbers were boosted? But he is only averaging 1 point a game through 2 games. The junior out of Columbia, Missouri. He's not a senior, he's junior, but very experienced player heading into his 4th year in college. So they've got a very, very nice blend of depth, experience, youth, talent overall. Hunter Dickinson, Kevin McCullar at 6'7" at that kind of guard wing spot. Those are the 2 players that I'm going to be paying attention to the most in this one. Not necessarily from a matchup standpoint, but if you want to know who's going to pop off, it's probably going to be one of those 2 players. I want to kind of dive into the matchups here. How does Kentucky face off against some of these better players, this very, very tall roster? Because a season ago, Kentucky did not have the wings or the power forward to really compete with Kansas. How do they do it this year with a team that is very tall and aggressive and likes to attack the rim? We're going to talk about it in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Jayce Medical. There is a lot of uncertainty going on in the world right now, and it's really, really solid if you can be prepared. It's very important to be prepared for anything. The Jayce case can provide you that preparation. It is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can customize your case to add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs, and all it takes to get a Jayce case is to fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of their board-certified physicians. You can get ongoing care from their physicians on any treatment-related questions. It is doctor-created, doctor-recommended. You do not want to be caught unprepared. Choose the medications that best fit you and your family's unique needs. Go to jacemedical.com and enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That is promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com. Do not get caught unprepared. All right, continuing along here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Really appreciate you making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel already, please go ahead and do so. If you're listening on podcast, I would really appreciate it if you did that as well. So we got through the Jayhawks. Very dominant through their first 2 games against no-name teams. They've got a nice blend of youth and experience. Very talented, very tall, very aggressive on the offensive end, very solid on the defensive end as well. If you go and look at KenPom, which some of you may not have access to, they're actually the 4th best defense in the nation and the 8th best offense in the country. Really, really uncommon to see a team inside the top 10 in both areas there. So what do we think about the matchup for the Kentucky Wildcats in this one? We know what Kansas is. We know what Kentucky is. How do the Wildcats try and take down the Jayhawks? Well, I think the biggest thing, and we discussed this just a second ago, is Kentucky's youth in this one. And we talked about this on yesterday's show as well. Let's reiterate it here real quick. Kentucky is a very inexperienced team. They are a very talented team. They're a very competent team. but they're also a very short-handed team. So Kentucky's going to be fighting an uphill battle here throughout this contest. I expect if they don't and they end up blowing this team out somehow, then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'll be very impressed there if Kentucky's able to pull that off. But Kentucky, they have, for all of their issues, from a personnel standpoint, they have taken care of the basketball. They've done a very good job at making sure that they don't create a lot of turnovers. And through their 2 games, Kansas has not forced a lot of turnovers. Last year, they were top 25 in the nation in steal percentage. This year, so far through 2 games, not creating a lot of steals. They are working teams late into the shot clock. They are forcing teams those 2 teams in NC Central and Manhattan to find their shot. Obviously, it's a much better team. They're going to be able to do that with their length. But their shooting percentages on defense have also been incredibly low, which is not promising. This is a team that can play uber aggressive on one end of the floor and utilize their length and physicality to kind of dominate you on another. It's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for Kentucky, but I think that the biggest thing the Wildcats have going for them is that they are not really turnover prone so far, and Kansas has not done a great job of forcing those turnovers. I think when you look at Kentucky's backcourt, that's where you start with this matchup if you're trying to look at this from a positive perspective. From a personnel standpoint, you've got 4 guards that individually you feel good about different things that they do. DJ Wagner, stability. I think he's a very stable, confident player as well. Antonio Reeves, very aggressive shooter, really good at shooting the outside shot. Not the most consistent player in the world, but when he's on, he's very, very much so on and very difficult to stop. Rob Dillingham, great with the basketball in his hands, explosive, very fun shot creator, very entertaining to watch. And then you've got Reed Sheppard, who can do just a little bit of everything. He can shoot the basketball, he can distribute, he's got great court vision, he's really good on defense as well. All of these guys play very hard. I've been very impressed with that through 2 games. All of them play very, very aggressive, as well as Kansas. So I think that you have to appreciate the fact that Kentucky on their own has a lot of really strong backcourt players. And you look at Kansas, and I think they are more of a front-court-centric team, although they do have very talented guards that I think could be better scorers and more statistically impressive, I guess I should say. But they do tend to let some of their taller guys, KJ Adams, Kevin McCullar, Hunter Dickinson, kind of carry the load for them. And then when you look at whenever they get into their bench, you're looking at guys like, I think, Dylan White, Parker Braun, Johnny Furphy, like I mentioned earlier, 6'9", 6'10", 6'9", Jamari McDowell, who is 6'4" as a freshman. I mean, they've got a lot of length on this team. I believe they're top 10 in average height in the country. They, I think, will lean on their length and their athleticism on defense against this Kentucky backcourt, and I will be fascinated to see if Kentucky can overcome that. Can they shoot out of it? Can they get past them, and can they play well at the rim? As of right now, here's another number for you. Kansas is 12th nationally in the country when it comes to 2-point defense. Opponents are shooting 38.2% from inside the arc against Kansas. What do we need to see out of these guards? We need to see aggressiveness. We need to see them continue to push the pace and try and play their style of basketball. But we also don't need to see consistent poor shot selection. It will be a shame if Kentucky ends up in the first half taking way too many mid-range jumpers because they can't get into the lane like they want to, and they come out in the second half and they start to make adjustments, and we realize, hey, if they had played like this in the first half, maybe this would be a more competitive game, or maybe they'd be winning outright. I want to see Rob Dillingham, DJ Wagner, Reed Sheppard, Antonio Reeves not take those stupid half-balance floaters and chuck shots up. I want to see more efficient shot selection. I think you're going to see Kentucky with a better game plan in this one. And they've been pretty good about this, by the way, adjusting throughout these exhibition games and in these first 2 games of the season. But you have to see solid guard play from Kentucky. If it's one individual going off, great. But as a conglomerate, as a whole, Kentucky's backcourt is the strength of this team, and they need to rely on that. Those 4 guys, they need to lean on that experience there from Antonio Reeves, and then they need to lean on the talent from their other 3 freshman guards. I think that's the first thing we need to talk about when we discuss the matchups. The second thing we need to talk about is Kansas's dominance at the rim on the offensive end of the floor. They're shooting 73% from inside the arc, and a lot of that has to do with, again, Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams, Kevin McCullar being aggressive, getting to the rim. Kansas runs some of the most beautiful sets in the entire country. If you front the post, you are dead. You are going to have serious problems. How does Tre Mitchell handle things in this one? We've talked about it for what feels like over 2 months with Tre Mitchell, accepting the fact that he is going to be the guy that plays there down low for the majority of the time against Kansas. Aaron Bradshaw, Hugo, Zvonimir Ivisic, not available in this game. How does Tre Mitchell attack things defensively? Is he able to hold his own against these several players? Dawe Thiero is also something I think we really need to pay attention to in this one. Although coming off of concussion protocol and some scares there, he's going to have to step up because of the physicality that he brings to the table, because of the newfound, position that he has found himself in. You're going to need to see him step up and make plays in this one defensively. Securing rebounds, boxing guys out, contesting things at the rim. Dawe Thiero has to play well in this game defensively. And then another player that I think a lot of people don't have their eyes on, but you're going to have to, especially if Tre Mitchell gets into foul trouble, which I really hope is not the case. Jordan Burks has to be able to hold his own against guys like McCullar or Adams or Dickinson whenever he has to rotate into the five in this game. I think Kentucky's going to give up points in this one, regardless. I don't think it's going to be like in the 90s. It may be in the 80s. I don't know. They're going to have a hard time stopping this trio of wings and then the center there in Dickinson. Kansas's offense is just built to run around the rim, and Kentucky doesn't have a lot of height. And then, like we said on yesterday's show, and some of you question this in the comments, and I'm not going to sit here and be rude. I don't understand the pushback on me claiming that the team is shorthanded. You know, we had 7 scholarship players available for the game against Texas A&M Commerce, and we have 8 technically. If Dawe Thiero is available to play, and if nobody gets hurt in this one, we have 8 scholarship players available, as opposed to the Kansas Jayhawks. So let's look here. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different players. 5 players averaging over 20 minutes a game. 1, 2, 3, 4 extra, averaging at least 14 minutes a game on top of that. I'm not quite sure how much Damari McDowell is going to get involved in this one, but they have more significantly more depth, I think, than Kentucky does, and they're also a more experienced team. They're also a much taller team, so yes, shorthanded relative to their opponent tonight, and then shorthanded as a whole. I don't think you ever want to go into a game saying you have 7.5 scholarship players available. You may be comfortable saying, I've got 7.5, 8 scholarship players that I'm going to play that I'm very confident in, and then I've got a couple of guys outside of that on the bench that may get a little bit of action here and there. But Kentucky is shorthanded. There's no arguing that. You don't have enough players, and if you had your 3 7-footers, you would have a complete lineup. All of them would get to contribute one way or another for the Wildcats. Zvonimir Ivisic would probably not play a ton in this game, but you know what he would do? He would step in instead of Jordan Burks, I think, at times, to play that center role at 7'3", 7'4". You would have a little bit of height. You would have a little bit of aggression there at the rim. How does Kentucky handle that defensively? That's huge. Huge from Tre Mitchell, Jordan Burks, Dawe Thiero. Kentucky's guards, I think, are a strength in this game. Their ability to not turn the ball over, on paper, is a strength in this game. Let's monitor that. So, final thoughts here as Kentucky plays this one. What did we say on yesterday's show? And we're going to reiterate it here. This game will be awesome for Kentucky if they win it because of the resume boost that it could add to your resume whenever you reach the NCAA tournament. This one could help you understand what you know about your team, what you don't know about your team, and whether you can figure out what they're really good at and what they're not good at. This is an opportunity to kind of start to piece some of that together. I know you got to understand some of that through your first 2 games, but now you're playing a legitimate opponent. You'll get to learn some things. You'll get to reassure some things you already know. But at the end of the day, this game is not that important when it comes to what you could do in the postseason. Now, sure, it will absolutely boost your seed line, I think, if you can get this one, and a few others that are relative to Kansas's strength in the quad 1 range. But this game, I think, is not one to melt down over. I think that's what I said yesterday, and I'll say it again. It's not one to melt down over. It's not one to freak out about. It's okay if Kentucky loses, and it's okay if they win. If they win, we don't need to sit here and say, hey, we're going to go 40-0, Big Blue Nation national champs, but we can celebrate it. We can absolutely celebrate it. So big-time game tonight, big-time game when it comes to the name recognition, obviously the Champions Classic and such. It's going to be a good one, I think. Kentucky's going to be competitive. What do you think about this game? Let me know in the YouTube comments below or hit me on the socials at LockedOnUK. It's difficult. It's a tough out. Let's see how Kentucky fares in this one. One way or another, it's going to be all right. Jaden Quaintance has committed to Kentucky, 5-star center, top 10 player in next year's class. I want to dive into what Quaintance brings to the team next season. I'm looking at is just a very aggressive big man is what I wrote in my first notes here. Before I dive into that though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. You can add your job to the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right candidates you want to talk to faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, wrapping up the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you one more time here. If you have not subscribed to the show already, please go ahead and do so. Would really appreciate it. If you're listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. Let me know what you think of the show. At Locked On UK on Twitter is where you can find me. Jaden Quaintance, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I'm going to continue to say that until somebody corrects me. That is not how you pronounce his name. Initially, this 5-star center out of Raleigh, North Carolina, was expected to go to Missouri, but over the past couple of days, Quaintance started to shift towards the Wildcats. A couple of crystal balls came in, and he announced that he was going to be making a decision through this early signing period. And here we go, Kentucky, next year's class. I had a little bit of concern, I think I voiced a month or so ago, about how this team would play out for the 2024 class. But here we go. You now have 4 commits in next year's class. It brings you up to the #2 class in the nation. And this right here is your first 5-star, the #8 player in the country, #2 center, #1 player, obviously, in the state of North Carolina, 6'9", 230 pounds. What do we know about Jaden? The first thing you need to know is that he is a very aggressive dunker. This man dunks everything. That's what his scouting report says, what his highlight tape says. He's a very aggressive player around the rim, good rebounder, great finisher. I think he's also a very solid defender as well. According to 24/7 Sports, Adam Finkelstein, director of scouting, he said that Quaintance is one of the most naturally talented prospects in the country. Massive wingspan, 7'3" wingspan, vertical athleticism, strong frame, good hands, soft touch, shooting potential, natural face-up skill, and signs of a passing instinct. Not quite sure what that means. He also runs the floor well and is a solid rebounder when he commits himself. And that's something I wanted to talk about here. Well, the first thing I noticed about Quaintance is that it doesn't seem like the game in his high school environment doesn't seem like it's been very difficult for him. And I'm not saying that there's a lack of effort here. I'm just saying things just kind of come easy. He's not having to be aggressive a lot of times to get to the rim initially. Now, obviously, he's got some flashy finishes. He can throw down a bunch of dunks once he actually gets there. But I did not see a lot of having to work for different things. He's just able to get up in the air, like Finkelstein said. He's got a great vertical. He runs the floor well. He gets to his spots and he finishes. Literally, he throws it down. Also, something else that he pointed out here, the soft touch. When he's not dunking, he's got really soft touch around the rim. I was impressed with some of the moves that he made just finishing in different ways outside of just throwing the basketball through the hoop. the layups off the glass, the spinning it in, the touch on different post moves. I was impressed. He says shooting potential as well. I don't think this guy's going to be anybody you see outside the paint area or near the free throw line taking 15-foot, 18-foot jumpers at the most. I don't think you're going to be seeing that consistently. This is just, this is like throwback bully ball, dunk on everybody's head when you get the opportunity. Very physical player that I think will be a lot of fun to watch in a center role. With a player like Reed Sheppard next season, it's really fun to envision how these guys operate in the pick and roll because of how aggressive some of his finishes could be with handoffs from Sheppard or from whatever other guard that Kentucky would like to see. I'd like for you to go ahead, even though we're only 3 games into the season here, just to envision this 2024 class that is starting to unfold. You have Boogie Fland, who is a top 35 prospect, a really interesting point guard that I think is going to pair with Reed Sheppard pretty well. Somto Cyril, who is a top 70 prospect at 6'10", 240, very solid center in his own right, very aggressive player as well. Jaden Quaintance, 6'9", 230, top 10 prospect. So you've got 2 very big-bodied physical centers down low, and then you got another point guard in Travis Perry at 6'2", 170. I hope that Sheppard comes back and plays shooting guard for UK, because Fland, Perry, Sheppard, and then you got Somto, you got Quaintance. You're going to have to find some different answers at the wing spot, I think. Duthiero will still be here as well. But this is shaping up to be an interesting team next season with your 2 guys. 6'9", 6'10". I mean, not everybody can be 7 feet tall. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. I don't think it's going to be an issue. These guys should be really fun to watch, though. I'm very intrigued to see how the pairing of Quaintance and Cyril, both 2 very physical, dominant, just aggressive players, how they operate coming in and out of the game for the Wildcats, because they'll rotate. I don't think they'll be on the court at the same time. I think they'll rotate for the Wildcats. A lot of fun I think UK could have with next year's team. So if you've got any thoughts on Jaden Quaintance, welcome to the team, man. You can leave that in the YouTube comments below, or you can hit me on the socials. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDahl_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all for a recap episode of Kentucky versus Kansas. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.